Hey everybody, welcome back to Birds of a Feather with your host, Alan Bondar, aka The Unraveler, and your co-host, Elliot Christopherson, author of How to Leave or How to Stop Being a Christian. Awesome book. It's really powerful. Highly recommend you get it. The link is in the notes. You can also grab a copy of my book, How to Kill God the Easy Way. It's also in the notes, so you can grab a link for that. Both books drive at the same ending, but have a different process or approach to getting you there. So really good material.
But let's be honest. If you're a Christian, you probably won't read either one of them.
Yeah. Although I've had Christians actually read mine. Not sure what the outcome was totally, but I think a few of them may not have taken them all the way, but it's definitely shifted their thinking. So
yeah, I know. I was joking.
No, of course you were. I know. But it's hard to get Christians to read it. Thus, then the reason for the change in the name of my book when the second edition finally comes out. So
do you have a title? I forgot. Do you have a
I do. It's going to be called Unravelation, and the subtitle is How Those of Faith Find Freedom. In theory, anyway, assuming the agents and the publisher like that title. So I sent it off to several agents. Hopefully one of them responds. It could be up to 8 weeks, they say, before they even respond. So we'll see how that goes. But
hey, it's probably shorter these days. Fewer people are publishing books.
Hey, maybe you're right. So although if I don't hear from them in a shorter amount of time, then I'm really discouraged. Thanks, Elliot.
Sorry.
No, that's all right, man. You know what? I'll tell you what. I just got to have faith, which happens to be the title of our show today.
The secret ingredient.
What a good segue, man. How did you lead into that? It was perfect. So here we are. Yeah, here we are. We are going to be discussing faith today. Finally, because I don't think we have anything else on the go. Although you never know. We could rabbit trail off because that's what we do on Birds of a Feather. I mean, when we fly wherever the flock goes, wherever the wind
I have
goes.
no doubt it'll take us somewhere else.
I'm sure it will. But
I'll
anyway,
do my best to take it there.
Yeah. So every now and then as I'm delivering mail, because I listen to my iPhone music library on shuffle. And I can't seem to get the Christian songs and my old sermons and podcasts off of there. I don't know how to do it. I'm very frustrated about it. But I've been trying. But anyway, so I still have a lot of old stuff on there. And so they'll rotate through and these Christian songs will pop on. Well, today one of them by Barlow Girl came on called Never Alone. And I was listening to the lyrics and I thought, man, this is a good segue to lead into our topic of faith today. I'm just going to read these lyrics because it's pretty amazing. And this is what I think most Christians actually feel on a regular basis. But they're taught to believe God's always there. And so you just take it on faith that he's there, even though you genuinely have no reason to think he is. There's nothing happening other than you talking to yourself and believing something's there that isn't. But here are the lyrics. It goes, I waited for you today, but you didn't show. I needed you today, so where did you go? You told me to call, said you'd be there, and though I haven't seen you, are you still there? I cried out with no reply, and I can't feel you by my side, so I'll hold tight to what I know. You're here, and I'm never alone. I mean, you don't feel
it sounds like a psalm. Like that's straight out of Psalms.
Right. Exactly. I've been taught this. I don't really feel you. I don't see you. I don't know you're there. But just because I know, I believe it, I'm just going to, you're here. Why do I believe that? Just because. It goes on. It says, I know I cannot see you and I can't explain why. Such a deep, deep reassurance you've placed in my life. Whoa, we cannot separate because you're part of me. And though you're invisible, I'll trust the unseen. And then it repeats the chorus again. And that's essentially the lyrics of the song. But yeah, so, that leads us into what is faith. And this is interesting because when you look at the dictionary definition of faith, there are traditionally two basic definitions. And, there's like sometimes there's 6 or 7 or 8 even if you look, but they're all variations of these two, main ones. And one of them is a belief in something that you have no evidence for. And the other one is trust or reliance in a person or a thing. Confidence, basically, in a person or thing. Those are the two essential definitions. Now, the way a dictionary works is words get placed in there when they're used in a certain way and become predominantly the way the word is used, and so it gets thrown into the dictionary. And words will oftentimes have multiple meanings because of that very thing. And so words will often change over time, and so other definitions will get added to it. So when this word faith starts getting thrown around, I think a lot of people don't realize that there's actually those two definitions are significantly different from one another. So faith, the way I would understand it, the way I think it is used by those who are religious and believing in a God or something in the supernatural, is the one that belief in something for which there is no evidence. That genuinely that's faith, because according to Hebrews 11, right, faith is the evidence of things unseen. So that is your evidence, because there is no other evidence. So the argument from Scripture is this is your evidence. So as long as you have faith, that's how you know God exists. So that fits the faith without believing in something that has no evidence. Faith itself is the evidence. That's the way I understand faith. This other word, faith, got added because people use it in a different type of way, in a very metaphorical way, like I have faith in you that you'll get this done, or I have faith in this chair. People will say things like that. What they mean by those words are confidence. I have confidence in you. Why? Not because of something blind, because of something there's no evidence for, but because I know you. I've seen your actions. I know that you are capable of doing this, and I trust that you're going to do it because you're that kind of a person. So that type of faith is based on a confidence, on a trust factor that you have been able to evaluate. Same with a chair. Chairs hold you up. When you fly on a plane, people will say, well, it takes faith to fly on a plane. Well, not the kind of faith that you have as a Christian believing in God. It takes the confidence kind of faith, because you have evidence. You have, and you can even, and if a chair falls, you can even research the evidence to see why it broke this time, and you'll likely come to a conclusion. Well, this screw was loose, or this wood was rotted, or something like that, and there will be a reason why that particular chair failed. So when you say I have faith in something, and then a Christian says I have faith in something, I have faith in God, they're actually two different meanings. But somewhere along the line, because they're both included under this definition of faith, or this word faith for definitions, I think a lot of Christians have misconstrued them, or have construed them rather, into becoming the same thing. And they think when they say faith, they say, oh, I have confidence in God because there's evidence for him, when there actually isn't. And they're convoluting two different definitions of faith. And so I just wanted to set that right out the gate, and then let you respond to that or add clarity if anything needed to be said to that.
Well, you and I have discussed this quite a bit, and I think you know what my thoughts are on faith. But before we get too far away from the beginning, your opening, reading those lyrics, I think it's important to point out, if you read those again, it's somebody's desperate cry for why God is not showing up or not answering them. They're in despair, and like I said before, they're extracting that from numerous psalms where King David is crying out in the same way. And I think that for a Christian, you could just take the first few lines of that song and just stop right there, because that is the world we live in. God isn't showing up. God is not answering when you need him. You wait and you wait and you wait, like the song, and he's not there. And adding faith to that doesn't fix the problem, because God still isn't there. He still isn't showing up. Like I don't understand how people can go through life with these desperate pleas to God, not get an answer when they need it, and then think that they're going to just keep having faith.
Well, the irony, I think what they're saying is, I don't sense that God's never actually showing up, but I have confidence in this God. I have faith this God exists and he is there, and that's enough to sustain me, just because I know he'll take care of me, and whatever happens according to his will, right? That's kind of the idea behind it.
But where it fails for me is they'll retort with, well, okay, God is testing my faith or testing my confidence, whatever, and this will sustain me through these times of trial, waiting for God to show up. If their faith is being tested, when does it stop? Like, shouldn't God eventually show up like he did for Job and like reward their perseverance through their faith? with an answer or deliverance or something to some kind of reveal where, yes, you have passed the test, your faith got you through it, and now I'm going to, now I'm gonna finally come through for you since you have succeeded. That never happens. So people, they get their faith tested, their faith prevails, but how do they know they didn't test it and God just never showed, and he's actually proving that he's not actually there? Like, that's what's frustrating for me. And if you go back to the Psalms, how many times, I'm sure someone's done a study or analysis, because we've got how many Psalms? It's what, 140, 150, 150 Psalms. How many of those Psalms were King David crying out to God, "Why have you forsaken me? Where are you in my time of trouble?" And a lot of those Psalms, they claim, were written while he was being pursued by Saul through the wilderness, always a fugitive. David knew God, according to the Bible. He was a man after God's own heart. He knew God. He had seen the miracles. God had come to him in dreams. He sent Nathan to come and send David on this hero's journey to become king eventually. David knew that God was real. He knew that God cared about him. He had witnessed it for himself. Yet he was still, crying out to the world through these Psalms that, where is God? Why has he forsaken me? Why won't he come and deliver me from my enemies? I don't understand. And I think that's extremely telling. And it calls into question whether David actually had those real experiences with God, or if this was something happening inside of an imagination or a legend or something else that didn't actually manifest in the real world. Because someone who has met God or has gotten words from God or has seen the miracles, they know that is the truth, and there is no reason to continue to doubt, even when God is trying you to the ends of the earth. Like, that he's there. Like, to me, it's an admission that none of this was real.
So, at least the way I would have answered it as a Christian, and I think the way many do, is that part of what faith is trusting God even in those dark times where you don't sense his presence and he's putting you through the ringer. But the point is, my faith says God's always working out things for my good. Romans 8:28, because I love him. And so he's going to bring this out for my good end. And when it comes to faith, there isn't anything that can't be believed by faith. So no matter what occurs, faith you just basically believe whatever you want to believe about it. And essentially what that comes down to is however you've been taught regarding the working of God in your life. Some would believe he's so sovereign that, like I did, that down to the color of socks you put on in the morning has been ordained, and, some believe it's a lot less. And God just kind of leaves you to yourself and then says, oh, well, now I got to fix your mess, that kind of stuff. But when it comes to faith, it's just, I'm just believing this because God says that he's always there and working out for me. But there's no evidence of that at all. Literally, it's just faith without evidence. You are trusting that a God is there doing something behind the scenes, but you have no validation to demonstrate that whatsoever. There's no more evidence that God's doing it than there is a magical Stromboli doing it. There's just nothing about it. So it really comes down to just your belief system about this God. If you were born in a different country, you do a marvelous job of this in your. I think this is in the shorter version of the book that you gave to your dad, where you talk about how the different countries and where you're born and stuff like that, and how if you're born, what are the odds that you're just born in this country with the right belief or whatever. But and it's really well argued. You lay it out much better than I'm saying it now, but it's really
and I think that should be a topic for another conversation, because that's a much longer to actually lay all that out.
Yeah. I don't want to go down the path today, but we will. But anyway, the point is, what you believe here, somebody else believes in something entirely different in Africa or whatever, wherever they're born, whatever God it is they're worshiping, and so faith is a very slippery subject, because one who has faith or lives by faith, they determine their actions, their beliefs, they justify their beliefs, they determine what's truth, all by this thing called faith. And literally there's no glue, so to speak, that holds everybody's faith together, that gives you any sort of a determinative, this is what you have to believe in. It's just believe whatever you want, literally, because there's nothing you can't believe by faith. And that's why there are so
And
many.
that right there for me is where the conversation about faith ends. The counter is that you can believe anything by faith.
Yep.
So what is so special about Christian faith that makes it different than that? Now, my perception is that there's two definitions of faith. There's the traditional definition that I think Christianity has used for all time until recently, and it's the same definition that the rest of the world or a common man would use for faith. It's like you believe something just because you just take it on faith. Take it on faith. And then I think things have changed recently with the modern apologetics movement, especially in America, where they are trying desperately to redefine faith and say that faith, because of that verse in Hebrews, maybe it's like a misinterpretation of it, but they're saying faith is the evidence of things not seen. So they're trying to marry evidence and faith together and say, well, faith is evidence. And so what we are putting forward, you and I, as a definition of faith, which has been held for centuries, that you just take it on faith, they're trying to do this magic trick and redefine it so that then they can talk about the evidence, how they have justification for their faith. It's very frustrating, because why don't we just take faith and put it to the side and just talk about the evidence and the arguments? Well, Christians are forced to pay this homage to faith all the time, only for one reason. It's because the New Testament says you have to have faith. Otherwise, we wouldn't even be talking about it, because I think everybody intuitively knows this is a bad way to know things.
Right.
Just take it on faith is the same like excuse or rationale that every con man would use to try to get you that last 10% into going along with their con. Is, well, just trust me, just take it on faith. I mean, they're called confidence men for a reason. Faith is confidence, faith is trust, faith is just believing it. You know, it's seen as some kind of a virtue when it's within Christianity, coming from a Christian. But when you operate that way in the real world, it is definitely not a virtue.
No.
But they're forced to traffic in faith just because the Bible says that they have to.
Right. And supposedly for justification, because otherwise, without faith, you can't be saved from this horrible disease called sin, by which you're going to be punished for eternity if you don't believe in God. So, you know, once you're convinced in your mind that there is this horrible consequence for not having faith, then, you know, you're just going to have faith. Because like a lot of Christians think, well, what's the harm? Might as well believe. And, you know, the whole Pascal's wager thing. And so they'll just believe because it's better than the alternative. And the irony is that what they don't seem to realize is that by using Pascal's wager that way for Christianity, you're failing to realize that what if there was another God out there, a true God that isn't Yahweh, that actually, or even Yahweh, maybe he just tricked you with the Bible, and his goal is to make you have faith, and he punishes all who do have faith. Like, how do you know? If you're using Pascal's wager, then you really don't know what the ultimate consequences are, because all we know is that we have this book and we've claimed that it's God's word. But how do you know it's God's word? Maybe he's tricky. Has he come down and told you in your room? Has he sat down and said, hey, buddy, I'm God and I wrote this? Did he appear to you? I mean, if he didn't, then you're taking that on faith too. You don't know.
Right.
You know, just like everybody else believes in their holy book. And so when I think when one of the reasons Christians use it as believe faith as a virtue is because they, again, I'm arguing that they convolute the way that faith is used, you know, loosely in common language. Like I said, I have faith in you. Or you might say like if you're going to court for trial or whatever, you might say, I have faith we're going to win this. Well, what you mean by that is I have hope we're going to win this. You don't have faith, you have hope. And it convolutes this word faith. Faith is used like that, but what you really mean is hope. And I wish we would start using words that mean what we're saying, because now what we have is this confusion of faith and what people actually mean by it. Or you might say, let's, you know, get on this motorcycle or whatever. And I say, ooh, that looks scary. And you might say, oh, have a little faith. What you mean by that is take a risk. Or if you're going in a financial venture or something like that with a business, and somebody might say, have a little faith. What they mean is take a risk. That's what they mean. They don't mean the same thing Christians mean by have faith in God. You're not taking a risk in God. That's not what you mean. You don't mean just hope in God. You mean a sure thing. Faith is a definitive thing. I know. That's why Christians use that. I've heard so many preachers. I know that I know that I know that I know, right? That God exists, because that's what they believe faith is. It's a definitive knowledge that God exists. And that is different than the common ways faith is used. So when they turn around and say, oh, you atheists, you faith all the time. No, we don't. My examples are the chair, for example. That is not faith.
Yeah, and that's actually an interesting accusation. If you're going to accuse the atheist of using faith too, like you're trapping them into some kind of admission, then what you're really doing is you're saying that that's not a good thing. Because why would it be like if it takes more, they say this a lot, it takes more faith to believe in nothing or to believe that everything happened by chance than it does to believe in the gospel. Okay, well, if faith is a virtue, then I am more virtuous than you if that is actually what I'm doing as an atheist. If I have more faith as an atheist, then my faith has beaten yours because I have more, because it takes more faith. But I would even go a step further with this faith concept, because it irritates me, because I don't think faith is a real thing to begin with. Because we have all these synonyms, we have trust, confidence, hope. Like if we can use these in some way as a synonym for faith, then what is faith? I don't think faith is real. I think it's like this made up. It's a psychological trick. It's kind of like talking about forgiveness. I don't think forgiveness is a real thing either. It's some strange kind of state of mind. I mean, when you say I forgive you, what are you actually doing? You're saying you're okay with something. You're clearly not okay with it. Or like what are you doing when you're forgiving someone? It's just a brain state they're trying to put a label on, like faith. It's just a brain state that they can't really find a good word for, but the Bible says it. So, well, we'll just make it a real thing, and I just don't think it is.
Interesting. Yeah, the brain state thing is a good point.
Maybe faith is just belief.
Yeah. I mean, well, I mean, it is. I mean, so you don't choose what you believe, right? We do understand that. You don't sit up one day and say, I think I'm going to just choose today to believe blah.
Christians would say yes. Unfortunately, a lot of them would.
No, I agree. They claim that that's the case because when they're evangelizing, so to speak, or when they're talking to you, and like even to me, they constantly say, "Well, you just have to choose faith. You have to choose to believe." I'm like, how can I choose?
Yeah, make a choice for Jesus today.
Yeah, you can't make a choice towards something you're not convinced is true. Like that's illogical. That's ludicrous. That doesn't add up. Now, you can be a fool maybe and jump off the Empire State Building knowing that you're going to die when you do that. But I mean, very well that you're going to die when you do that. You're not convinced that you're going to fly. That's just silly.
Well, like you mentioned flying in planes. There isn't a single person, no matter how strong their faith, no matter how strong of a Christian they are, that would try to land a plane on faith. Every single plane would crash, no matter how strong their faith is. God is not going to land that plane for them. Right.
That's right.
I mean, they know this is a bad way to come to the truth. They know it.
Well,
like,
not only
they might not admit it, they might have somehow convinced themselves that it's not the case. But like,
well, not only do they know it, but they don't live by that type of faith in any other realm of their life.
Right.
Only when it comes to the supernatural, and that's why I'm saying I think somewhere along the line this term faith has been convoluted with other terms that we use, and I wish that we would stop using these other terms synonymously because they're not helping. It's just confusing things. So, if faith is this nonsensical thing you're talking about, just a mental state, just an ascension to this idea that a supernatural exists without any evidence for it, and literally it's being driven by emotion. Like there are consequences if you don't. So you're wrapped up in a desire that says I need this because without it I'm doomed. That's a valid reason to choose something. I mean, I would, and it's because you're convinced that the alternative is bad. So you are convinced this is the solution. Once you're convinced of that, then yes, it makes sense to go for it. The sad thing is people have been convinced that there's some sort of a consequence for not believing in God. And that's really sad.
Yeah. I mean, I don't have a whole lot more to add on faith. To me, it's a non-starter. If I go up to somebody on the street, just a random Christian, let's just pick one out of a hat, and I ask them, why do you believe the Bible? I don't think very many, if any, would tell me it's faith. Or if they're all, or if I ask them, do you have a good reason to believe the Bible? They're going to come up with a whole bunch of things, like all the common Christian apologetics or something from their pastor, and faith is not going to be at the top of their brain until we discuss the evidence and discuss the good reasons or bad reasons, and we get all the way through that stuff, and they've got nothing left, and they have no more responses. They don't know what to say, so they say, "Well, I just take it on faith."
Right.
Faith is a fallback. It's not a first line argument. Well, it's not an argument at all, but it's not a first line reason or excuse or a rationale for being a Christian. It's a last line of defense where I don't have an answer. I don't have a good reason. So I'm going to say I take it on faith. And that right there exposes why it's irrational and why we shouldn't even be talking about it, because that's not why you're a Christian. It is not the good reason you would give me for asking why you are one.
I suppose the reason to figure out then, because I think this is what's causing faith, is that question: what is causing you to have faith? Like, and I think that's the real problem, because until they unravel what the underlying issue is that's driving them to the sting of faith, because I think you're right, it's a silly idea. Like, you don't start there. It's the last line of defense. You get to a point where, like, they can't prove the existence of God, and you say, okay, well then how do you know it's Yahweh instead of this
Right.
flying spaghetti monster? And then you just have to have faith. Okay, well then we did all this for no reason, because you're just going to claim faith anyway. The real question is, why do you have faith? What's driving that faith? And if they're honest with themselves, I think it's the underlying fear that God will punish them forever if they don't have it. But then that's where I say it's brainwashing, because you didn't wake up, you weren't born with faith that God exists. That was taught to you. This whole idea that there's a God up there and you're going to be punished if you don't worship him, that's taught to you. You don't have faith in that. But it becomes faith, and then it becomes cyclical. You become trapped in this Christian matrix, and then you can't get out. We have faith that, you have faith now that God exists because he's going to punish you if you don't. And then you just trust Jesus. And why? Because the Bible talks about him. Well, why do you believe the Bible is true? Because, we just take it on faith. It's like, you don't know. I don't know how you escape, honestly. I'm still struggling to understand what woke me up in that moment. But I know it was brainwashing, and somehow I was able to just get rid of it finally. But it's a crazy place to be, man, trapped in faith.
And this idea of faith permeates a lot more of our pop culture than we realize. For example, how many? I'm gonna bring up Santa Claus. I know that is kind of triggering for some Christians, because it seems like I'm using that to mock belief in God. But the belief in Santa Claus. How many Christmas movies have we seen, like going way back, like Miracle on 34th Street, where this idea of having faith, childlike faith, to believe that Santa Claus is real, and in the end, oh my God, they pull off some sort of a miracle, and whatever the story happens to be. But as a child, I'm sure. Did you ever believe in Santa Claus?
I might have really early on, but it wasn't like a big thing for me.
But I think most of us, at least those of us who were public schooled, have had that point in our life, maybe around 7, 8, or 9, when about half of our class has figured it out or abandoned the idea for whatever reason, and the other half hasn't, and it causes a great number of playground arguments. One the half that still believes, having a real hard time with their peers telling them that it's BS, and they will come up with a lot of arguments about, like, well, how does Santa do the things that he does? But this idea of having to believe and having to have faith in this character will come up at some point, and it's frustrating that we recognize that this is not the way to come to the truth about something like that, a childhood belief that it is supposed to go away at a certain age, and we're going to interject faith into that as a child, but then we, as a coming of age, we put away those things, we realize they're not true, and we eject that childlike faith from our lives with something that was very important to us at one point, but is not true, and we shouldn't, drag it on with us into maturity. But seeing faith permeate much more of our culture than just the belief in God is frustrating, because it's building a negative foundation or a support system in the culture that keeps people maintaining this silly idea.
Yeah.
So it's more than just religion or Christianity.
Well,
it's something we got to work on as a society as a whole.
It's dangerous, in my opinion, this idea of faith, because it makes you gullible, and I don't mean that just like, I'm not trying to be rude, but it does. It makes you gullible. You can literally you'll be tricked into believing anything if you live a life by faith. If you find a good swindler, they can convince you that something is better for your life, or you can be convinced of some other supernatural being. I mean, and I think that's how people come to believe so many things happen, when they have an experience and they're with a bunch of people and they say, this is what's happening, and you just suddenly believe it. That faith is a very strange way to make decisions on what you believe in life. The Santa Claus thing, and real quick before I go there, and I think that's why so many religious leaders have been able to rise up and cause so many problems, dangerous ones that have caused mass suicides. And I'm not saying that
or mass murders too.
Mass murders, yeah. And I'm not saying that religion is the only cause of these things. It certainly isn't. But we can certainly do without this one.
Well, it's not religion that's the cause necessarily. It's this mindset of not being skeptical and not demanding good reasons,
right?
And demanding proof, because I think most people, they never second guess their own feelings about something. If something feels good or sounds good to them, they'll just accept it.
Right.
They won't question it. It's like, well, my feelings are 100% always. My intuition is never wrong. This sounds like a great idea. I just like this. And maybe it fixes some kind of problem in their life, or maybe that problem is just not feeling good. It just makes me feel good.
Right.
And they just accept it wholeheartedly all the time. And to reason somebody out of a position like that is 10 times harder than to get them into it in the first place. If we're dealing with feelings and intuition and preference and need, essentially. So we have to build a foundation in skepticism or rationality in order to get to the right conclusions in life. And most people just don't have that. I didn't have that as a Christian. I didn't have that my entire life until I left Christianity. And I had to not rebuild that foundation, but I had to build it from the ground up for the first time in my life. So, and now I demand evidence and proof for things. And if you can't provide it, like, I have no reason to accept it. It's the
right.
In mathematics, it's called the null hypothesis.
Right.
Until something is shown to have an effect, you cannot assume it has an effect.
So, I always was like that. I was a skeptic my whole life, even as a Christian. The problem was that when you're in that matrix, you're never skeptical about the matrix. You're never skeptical about whether or not God exists. It's just not something you visit. You don't think in terms of evidence for God. Well, I mean, you think you have it, and that's the first problem. Is these apologists aren't helping the matters at all, because they're producing all these pieces of evidence that align with the proposition that a God exists, But as we discussed many times, they align with just about anything that exists. It doesn't prove God anyway, but once you believe a God exists, they all point to it. And so it's like, man, look at all this evidence. It's just like, you know, and presuppositionalism for me was the biggest. So, so I did go down that path. Like I dealt with evidentialism. I dealt with apologetics quite a bit as a Christian, and I didn't find any of them compelling. Like I was like, oh, evidentialism, that you can't prove God exists that way. I saw that from the beginning.
Were you a presuppositionalist?
Which is why I became a presuppositionalist. Yeah, because
Okay.
I couldn't see any other thing working. But in my opinion, presuppositionalism works as long as you believe sin exists. And so that was for me, like so even if I was thinking in terms of questioning God, as I became a presuppositionalist, because as long as I believed sin existed, there was no questioning God. Like he was the only possible solution to this sin problem. And that's why no other religion would solve it either, because they were all works-based. So, so the problem is sin. The idea of sin is a sleight of hand. It's a sleight of hand in the magic trick, right? As long as you don't get them thinking that sin might not be a thing, there is no other option but God, and that's an absolute solution to the problem. And so you know, because it's presented to us as, well, you've ever talked back to your mom? Well, yeah, I've done that. Well, you're a sinner, right? And so you're automatically a sinner because you did this little sin or whatever. Did you ever think about, somebody inappropriately, lustfully? Yeah, well, yeah, you're a sinner, right? So you become a sinner right out the gate, and you never question it because you never think in terms of just doing bad things. You think in terms of this idea of sin. And then once you have this sin problem, that's, and you look around you and you see people dying, and you told, well, the consequence of your sin is this death thing. And so you're like, oh shit, now I need a solution for what am I going to do? Right. So it's just, you never question that because it just seems so obvious the way it's presented. This is sin. There's the consequence. Boom. Oh shit. God must exist. He's the only solution to this. Right. So that's why even as a skeptic, as a Christian, it's so hard to break free, because you just never question this underlying sleight of hand called sin. It never gets questioned. But when it comes to like thinking about these things, for Christians who don't question anything at all or don't question their faith, back to your Santa Claus analogy, I would like to challenge you, if you're a Christian, to think about this. Why don't you have faith in Santa Claus anymore? Why don't you believe Santa Claus exists? What evidence did you use to demonstrate to you that he is not worthy of having faith in anymore? What stopped your faith? Because as a child, you believed it, certainly. Well, at least most of you did, probably. So what made you stop believing Santa Claus? And I would venture to guess you would present a case saying, well, I have no reason to believe in Santa Claus. He doesn't appear. There's no visual evidence. Mom and dad actually put the presents under the tree. I've never seen reindeer on the roof. None of you can go to the North Pole. He's not there. So there's no reason to believe that Santa Claus exists. Why don't you apply that to God? Because it's the same exact reasoning. Like, there's no reason to believe in God. What is your evidence for the existence of God? And the bottom line is, as we were explaining earlier, you have none, because when you get to the end of your rope of all these supposed evidences, at the end of the day, you're just saying, well, you just have to have faith. What would stop that faith? Perhaps you need to evaluate the things that are driving that faith, just like you did with Santa Claus.
Well, not necessarily a problem with that, but the fact that you mentioned the sin being the foundation of the problem, that isn't going to remove the sin issue in their minds, the evidence.
No, that's true.
I think that it's not a sin problem that everyone's afraid of. I think it's a death problem.
Okay. But the result is death. Yeah, sure.
Yeah. I think people are not afraid of the consequences of their sin necessarily. I think that underneath all of this lies this issue that we're going to die, and we desperately, desperately do not want to. And so we are looking for not a solution to sin, but a solution to death. And Christianity is one of the few religions that actually gives them an escape hatch for that. And I think that is what it's trying to come up with a Band-Aid for.
Well, I think that's because biblically,
I think
because biblically they're intimately connected, right? The wages of sin is death. Without one, you don't have the other.
Right, but I don't think Christians honestly give much of a crap about sin, because they're gonna do whatever they want in life anyway. They're not afraid necessarily of God's judgment on their sin. And as Christians, especially, they are thinking that they are already forgiven or that they can get forgiven very easily. They're concerned about dying and maybe not even going to hell necessarily. They're just afraid of death, the permanence of it, the fact that, well, the alternative to Christianity, I guess the default hypothesis under atheism is that when the lights go off of the brain, that's it. I'm erased from existence, and that's something that's very difficult for the human brain to get to comprehend. And they're desperately looking for a solution to that. So I would challenge Christians that to take that fear of death, that fear of non-existence. We don't even have to talk about hell. Just take death out of it and reevaluate your beliefs, assuming that this is an interesting thought experiment. Assume that Christianity might be true, but there's no afterlife. Would you still be a Christian if there was no promise of an afterlife? If God said, follow me, keep my commandments, believe in Jesus, live the Christian life while you're alive, because I told you to, because I'm God, accept it on faith, but I'm not offering you an afterlife. There is no heaven. It ends at death. Then ask yourself, would you still be a Christian? And if your answer is no, because you don't have the promise of an afterlife, then you need to have a look at the evidence. Because just this magical, I'll live forever, you take that out of it. Like, if that's your whole goal here, just remove that for a second. Would you still be a Christian? Would the evidence matter at that point? Because if that's the only reason you're a Christian, they need to reevaluate why you're really a Christian.
That's a really, really good point. In fact, that's a superb point, because one of the things that I will hear Christians all the time say is, "Oh, I'm not a Christian because I'm afraid of God." There's not fear of punishment. They want to make it sound like they're Christians because they love God and desire God and truly enjoy Him because He's such a wonderful God, not because of fear. They really don't want to be trapped into that. I'm only believing because I'm scared. They really want to convince others and themselves that they're believing in God because they love Him and they cherish Him. And they think He's so wonderful. But to your point, if you take eternity out of it, is God still so wonderful that you would still trust Him and follow Him and do what He says? Like, why? Why would you? Like, what is?
Yeah,
What
it's taking the existential dread out of the debate between Christianity and atheism. It's like that existential threat of losing your faith and then dying for good. Is that what's keeping you a Christian? Is that what's keeping you from looking at the evidence? Like, is that what is activating your fight or flight mechanism when people recommend books that aren't Christian, or want to discuss the evidence and the arguments, or want to debate the existence of God or the reliability of the Gospels? Is that fear, that resistance to having those conversations and engaging with that material, is that resistance coming from existential dread of the consequences of no longer being a Christian, the consequences of, well, shit, now I'm going to die? Like, is that it? Because put that to the side and then see where you're at.
Yeah, no, for sure. See where you're at, because that would be a good way to test whether or not you're truly having faith in God because you just love Him and cherish Him and just can't imagine how life without this wonderful God. Take the existential dread out of it, and what do you have left? Like, you have this "Never Alone" song by Barlow Girl. Like, you're just literally.
Are you calling the Bible the truth because you are afraid of dying?
Yeah. Yep. Good stuff, man. So yeah, if you're watching this, I challenge you to think about some of the things that Ellie and I have talked about today. Again, if you'd like to dive in further, grab one of our books in the notes below. But we appreciate you joining us. Who knows what we'll talk about next week, wherever the wind blows us. So it's been fun. I think we pretty much just our new motto is we're birds. Welcome to Birds of a Feather, where we will try to limit ourselves to 30 minutes, but promise you we'll break that. We'll fly past that time. So we'll work out the wording at some point.
But hey, you know what? If they made it through the whole video, then apparently 30 minutes didn't matter to them.
That's right. That's right. So anyway, we kid around the 30 minutes now. I guess it's just not even a thing, but we'll try not to go for like hours or anything like that. But this is always fun. It's always a good time. So we'll see where we go next week. Elliot, thanks again for joining me. It's been fun. And And make sure you like and subscribe. We really do appreciate that. It helps us out a lot. Leave a comment. We like interacting with you. That's a lot of fun. And also share this to your wall. Share it with people that might need to hear this or be challenged by it. Because we care. We want to help people see that faith is just nonsense.
Absolutely.
And we hope that they'll start living by reason instead of faith. That's a much better way to live. So
yeah,
with
we
that,
do have something. We don't have eternal life to offer you, but we do have rationality.
right.
And
So,
you know what? It's good enough.
Right. Yep. Almost the opposite of what Peter said. Silver and gold have I none, but what I do have is something I forget how the verse went at this point. But we're reversing that. Anyway, all right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us. And remember, we don't flock around.